All right, true or false, Jesus was busy. You're like, I don't know, we're talking about busyness as a sin. Can I say true? Who thinks he was busy? Yeah, he was busy saving the world. You know, that's a pretty big deal. Anybody try to do that? Right? Saving the world. But here's the problem. The problem isn't that we have a lot to do, right? Because we all have a lot to do. If you're a parent, game over. If you're a parent with a job, that's a lot to do. If you have a lot of kids, that's a lot to do. But here's what happens. The problem is when we have too much to do, and the only way we do it is hurried, right? Hurried. Because here's why. Hurry and love are incompatible, right? They cannot go. We joked about this in VIP, but if you've ever been late for church, I want you to tell me the next time so I can look at your kid, your spouse, your friend, and be like, did you feel loved on the way here? Did you feel encouraged on the way here? Did my kids feel loved when I am yelling at them, dragging them by their hoodie? Get in the car, right? I don't have to deal with that anymore. That's my wife's issue because I come early. But they're making it, right? And so hurry and love, they're incompatible. And here's what the problem is, right? You and I are called to love God and to love people. And so if this is something that we're supposed to do, something isn't added up. Because if I were to ask us how many of us are busy, 90% of the hands would fly up, right? And so what's going on? And then you think about this, right? This makes sense to us because if you've ever been to a wedding, the first thing we learn about love is it's what? Patient. Can you be patient in a hurry? No, right? It doesn't make sense at all. And then think back to this. Think back to Jesus, right? We just identified that he's super busy, tons to do, saving the world, teaching, doing all these things. But he doesn't start his ministry till he's 30. What's he do those first 30 years? Don't know all of the answers. It's on my list of questions to ask him when we get there. But then he starts his ministry, and he only does it for 3 years. And in those 3 years, you know how many times we see him running? Rushing? He even rides some animals, and you know what he picks? He doesn't pick a horse. He jumps on Eeyore. Any of you ever seen Eeyore run a red light? No, right? The slowest animal on the planet, besides a sloth and maybe a panda, right? And he just walks into town. And there's stories after story after story, right? Hey, my daughter's dying. Hey, your best friend's dying. Okay, cool. Let's go on a trip. Ooh, but here's an interruption. And this is something that I love. And actually, one of our small group people said that Jesus was interruptible, but he was never distractible. Right? It was so good. We wrote it down. It was so awesome. Right? Jesus was interruptible, but he wasn't distractible. And so if Jesus was never rushing around, if he was never in a hurry, what's happened to us as our generation? And I couldn't think of a better way to say this. And so there's a quote by Corey ten Boom. It says this: if the devil can't make you sin, he will make you busy. Right? If the devil can't make you sin, he will make you busy, because sin and busyness, they have the same effect, right? They cut off your connection to God, and they cut off your connection with others. And so the great danger for many of us is that we will become so distracted, so rushed, so preoccupied with other things that we'll settle for this mediocre version of life, right? Think about this. I won't ask you to raise your hand, but most of us will just skim our lives instead of actually living them because we're so rushed, so busy, so focused, right? This busyness, this hurried lifestyle, it kills our relationships, it kills our joy, it kills our peace, and if we're honest, it's slowly killing ourselves, right? It's blinding us, and it makes us miss God, right? Busyness is taking our attention off God, and it puts it on things that are less important, right? We sit around and we stare at our phones, we stare at our TVs, we look at endless to-do lists, and we're oblivious to a God that is all around us, that is with us always, and that is literally dwelling inside of every single born-again believer, right? Every person who's went all in with Jesus. And so here's the big idea for the day, right? You have time for what you choose to have time for, okay? And I want you to see that for a second. You have time for what you choose to have time for, right? Because everyone says they're busy, but we're not as busy as we think, right? Life is a series of choices. Every yes is a bunch of no's, right? Every time you say yes, by nature, you can't say yes to everything, so it leads to no's. And so think about this. You might have said yes to starting a business, but it cost you your marriage, right? You may have watched all 14 seasons of Friends, but you never learned to love Scripture, to love praying. And I'm going to come after the guys because this was me for a little bit. Do you know, is Chip in here? Chip can't answer this question. I appreciate that. Do you know how many hours a guy typically spends playing video games by the age of 21? Let me just rock this. 10,000. 10,000. Now, I don't think I hit that level because we just had Super Nintendo. We didn't have anything cool. 10,000. You know what you can do in 10,000 hours? You can get a bachelor's and a master's. You can master any trait or sport in the world. You can also memorize the entire New Testament or beat level 5 of Call of Duty. I'm not attacking. I love video games. I'm just saying. You have time for what you choose to have time for. And here's why this is important. And I want this to sink in. This is not an attack, right? There's no shame. You guys know me. I'm never here to guilt you. I am just as bad. I play Super Smash Brothers, not that many hours because it gets kind of boring, with my daughter weekly because that's what she likes to do. But you have time for what you have time for, right? And here's why this matters to me. I don't want you to get to the end of your life and realize that in the hurry and busyness, you miss the most important things, right? I don't want you to miss the most important things. And Paul tells us this, right, in Ephesians 5. This is what he says. He says, look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time. Why? Because the days are evil, right? The day will easily get away with us. True confession, Milligan College, playing. I woke up super early. I don't sleep a lot. I said, man, I'm going to wake up on this Saturday. My roommates are gone. They were playing golf, playing tennis. I said, I'll just play Halo, the first one. Don't judge me. And I'm just going to play till breakfast. Breakfast is at 10, brunch on Saturdays. I said, man, okay, I've played for a while. I'm a little hungry. It was dinner time. Right? Days are evil. I just sat there killing aliens. Master Chief was on fire. Like I was doing great. But we're not as busy as we think, right? We're not as busy as we think. You have time for what you choose to have time for. How we spend our time is how we spend our lives. And that's something I want you to get to sink in. Because if we were to sit down and be like, hey, from the moment you wake up to the moment you sleep, all the things you do, I'm so busy. But you know the average person, 2.5 hours on social media every day. That's average. If you're younger than 20, you blow that out of the water. If you're older than 60, maybe with Facebook. But average person, 2.5 hours every day. 2.5 hours. And I'd like to say that that's not me. But I think it is. And so we got this problem, right? Busyness. We know busyness is a problem. We've all been there. I could tell you quote after quote after quote, but how do we overcome it, right? How do we beat this? Well, I got it. It's an easy solution. We just get more time. Right? Did anybody ever ask for that? I just wish I had a few more hours in the day. If God would just give me one more day this week, like that's even possible. I know nothing's impossible with God, but maybe he'd just be like, you got it. You know what? I'm going to give you 3 extra hours. Time stands still for the rest of the world, but you got your extra 3 hours. What would you do? You'd just cram it full of more stuff, right? Like we would just be more busy. Like if I said, man, if I got a whole extra day, I would do all the things that I really want to do, which is not true, right? I would just get behind of my to-do list and all the things that I typically do, and I would just be like, oh, actually, I feel worse because now I have all this extra time and now I'm just cramming more stuff in there. And so the way that we overcome busyness is to slow down and simplify our lives around what really matters. And again, I know this sounds like, oh, you don't know me, right? And I admitted this morning. I'm going to admit this to you. I've never been a mom with young kids. Never been my experience. Never done it. Don't think I ever will. Doesn't sound that much fun. Right? But no matter where you are in your walk of life, the things that we're about to talk to can happen. Everyone say, I believe they can happen. A couple of you didn't say it because you know what I'm about to go to. Matthew 11, okay? Matthew 11, if you grew up in church, you've heard these verses. They sound nice, but we're like, I don't know if that's really true. This is what Jesus says, right? So these are red letter in your Bible. Jesus says this, verse 28. Come to me, all who are wearied. Anybody tired? Come to me, all who are weary and burdened. Anyone overwhelmed? Okay, so just to be clear, this is who we're talking to. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. How many people just want to take a vacation just to do nothing? Right? Like we got staycations to get projects done. I just want to sleep. Right? My wife and I, first date after Cooper and Kenley born, you know what we did? Great plans to go out to dinner. We fell asleep on the couch, and it was glorious. It was the best date we'd ever had. All right, come to me, all who are weary and burdened, I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Here's this word again. My yoke is easy and my burden is light. We're going to talk about this because unless you grew up in those olden days, you don't have a clue what a yolk is, right? Not the inside of the egg, but it's a different thing. And we're going to talk about that. But I want you to hear this from the Message, right? The Message was written by a guy named Eugene Peterson. It's not a word-for-word translation. It's like a thesis, right? And so here's how he phrased this, okay? Are you tired? Worn out? Burned out on religion? Come to me, right? Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me, work with me, watch how I do it. And I love this part. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Now, if we're being honest, how many of us want that, right? Like we desire that. I would love to have that kind of life. But then just like Tony was saying earlier, we don't think it's really possible. We don't think that we could really do that, right? These unforced rhythms of grace, what does that mean? Break it down, right? This is an invitation for all the tired, all the burned out, all the stressed, all those who are stuck behind their to-do list, right? He says, come get away with me. Not escape this life, right? Just escape the busyness, the hurry, 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 right? Come with me, watch how I do it, and learn from me, right? Jesus' invitation is to take up his yoke, which is a weird word for us because most of us aren't farmers, right? But a yoke was a tool that put two oxen together, shoulder to shoulder, right? And so they would go through and they would plow through this field, pulling the load together. And so what Jesus is saying is like, hey, I want you to come travel through life where? Right next to me. Put my yoke on. And if we do that, it literally means we are bound together with him. And then he says, what? I'm going to give you the easy yoke. I'm going to give you the light side. I'm going to do all the heavy lifting, right? I'm going to do all of it. I just want you to stand right next to me and go through this life with me, right? That's the secret. That's the goal. But we miss it, right? We miss this idea because we think, man, that's not possible. I can't have an easy life. How many of you thought an easy life was possible 20 minutes ago? You going to call Jesus a liar? Because I thought about it. I said, there's no way we can have an easy life. Jesus, you don't know what it's like to live in 2023, right? And we think these thoughts and we say these things. You don't know about my kids. You don't know about my job. You don't know about my story. He's like, yeah, I do, right? And that's why I want you to come right next to me. What happens if you've gone off ahead of me or you've just left me and you're behind me and you're trying to carry this weight, carry this burden all on your own? He says, no. I just want you to take my yoke, right? Do this life with me, right? And that's the secret. Everyone's like, well, I don't know, Matthew 11, it sounds nice, but we can't make it happen. That's the secret. The secret is live life like Jesus lived. And you're like, oh, great job, Pastor. Thanks for that revelation. But it's the truth, right? If we adopt his lifestyle, all of it. So we do this. Love your enemies. Got it. Turn the other cheek. Got it. Now live my life the rest of the way the world does. What does that make us? More busy. It gives us something else to do because most of us just try to add Jesus to our life, right? Well, I am a school counselor who loves Jesus. No. You're a follower of Jesus who just happens to work at a school, right? Well, I sell cars or I like to exercise, or I work here, I work here. No, you don't. Those are not who you are. Those are just things you do. Who you are is a child of God, right? And Jesus says, put my yoke on, shoulder to shoulder. Let's go through this life. Because the hardest way for you and I to follow Jesus is to live like the world, right? To live like everyone else and then just add Jesus where you can. Man, I'm tired and wore out. I guess I better pray. I'm tired and worn out. I better jump on that Bible app real quick. And Jesus is like, no. The easiest way to follow me is to alter your lifestyle and mirror mine. Not just one principle, not just one command, but his whole life. And here's the takeaway, right? If you want to experience the life of Jesus, then you have to adopt the lifestyle of Jesus. Right? If you want to experience the life of Jesus, then you have to adopt the lifestyle of Jesus. But what's the problem? The truth is, most of us want that life. Anybody want peace, joy, kindness? Anybody want those things? Are you willing to do what it takes to get them? No. That's not what you asked, right? We're not willing to adopt his lifestyles, but we read these stories of him doing these amazing things, of all this joy and all this peace and all of these promises, and he promises his life and life to the full, and we say, I want that. And he's like, oh, good, then just shoulder up to me. Go through life living it my way. And we're like, ooh, no thank you. And I think one of the reasons that we're scared to live like Jesus is because we know that his life leads to death, right? We know that his life leads to death. We have to give something up just like he did. His life leads to a cross, right? It leads to death. But it doesn't stop there. We know this, right? His cross led to an empty tomb. And in the way of Jesus, death is always followed by a resurrection, right? And so we don't have to be scared to walk alongside him because he's going to take us, right? We're going to carry our cross just like he calls us to do, and there's going to be something that dies. It's our old life, and he wants to resurrect a new one where we follow his way. And we see this, right? If you look back at those verses, what does Jesus offer those who are tired and weary? Does he say, I got this new mattress. Here's a vacation. You need a vacation. How many of you guys know a vacation doesn't reconnect you to God? It just reconnects you to your family and friends. Right? And so we say, oh, I'm so tired. I'm so overwhelmed. I'm just going to go on this big, awesome vacation. But then, what do you do on your vacation? Stuff. Right? You're like, oh, I'm just going to take it easy. I'm going to take a break. You know, I watched a guy, and he took his kids on a cruise. And you know what these kids had the audacity to say? Dad, we're bored. We're bored. You know why they were bored? They didn't have Wi-Fi. I said, now, as a dad who's a cheapskate and buys nice things for his kids, I take my kids on a cruise and they say we're bored, we're coming home with one less kid. I'm going to show you bored. Swim to the Bahamas. Not really. That's murder. I know it's not an acceptable sin. I would think about it. But you think about this, right? Jesus doesn't say, here's a mattress. Sometimes he does, right? We remember Elisha. What happened when he got tired and overwhelmed? Take a nap and eat. That's Bible. Take a nap and eat. Take a nap and eat. So sometimes he offers that. He doesn't offer a vacation. He offers something entirely different, an easy yoke, an easier way of living. And I want you to hear this. Jesus knows that life is hard, but he doesn't offer us an escape. He offers us equipment, right? Yoke is a piece of equipment. He doesn't offer us an escape. He offers us an equipment. And here's what we know. People all over the world are looking for an escape, right? A way out of this lifestyle. But we know there's no escaping it. The best the world has to offer are temporary distractions. Why do you think all of us are so easily distractible? Because we all want a break, right? We all want an escape, but Jesus didn't offer us an escape. He offered us something better, equipment. The yoke puts us shoulder to shoulder, and Jesus says, come next to me, right? Give me your attention. Give me your presence. Let me do the heavy lifting. Follow me, right? At my pace. This unhurried pace, because an easy life isn't an option, but an easy yoke is. But if we're honest, right, some of us are afraid to stop. We're afraid to slow down and be alone with God, because if we stop long enough, what happens? This pain that we've been running from catches up. Right? This emptiness starts to rise up, and we don't like it. We don't like the discomfort that these things bring, because some of us have been running for years. Right? Some of you have been running for years trying to escape a variety of things. And you've tried escaping that in a variety of ways, but just because you bury it doesn't mean it's coming back up. And just because you've outrun it doesn't mean it won't catch up. And so what we have to do is slow down and open up that part of our life to Jesus. Let him heal you, right? Remember, there's no healing in hiding. Open up that pain, open up that emptiness, and ask Jesus to speak directly to it. And so what are the ways we do that, right? What are the ways we do that? How can we practically slow down our lives? Because it sounds good, right? I really want to do that, but you don't know my schedule. Remember, following Jesus is something you actually do, right? Following requires action. His invitation is an invitation to a life that we long for, that we ache for, but it requires us to go through life very specifically, shoulder to shoulder with him. And so there's two practices and then a third one that I'm going to give you just for fun that Jesus incorporates into his life over and over and over. And I want you to know this first one, it's not a command, right? He never once tells us to do it, but what does he say? Hey, follow me. And if I'm doing it and you're following me, what should you do? You do it. So the first one is this, silence and solitude. Right now, I know some of you just read them like, never going to happen. Right? Silence and solitude. When we don't have enough silence and solitude in our life, that's when we start to feel distant from God. And we lose sight of our identity and our calling, and we start to give attention to things that are urgent but not important. Right? Because we start moving faster and faster and faster and faster, right? We spend all our energy on things that aren't important, and then we get tired, and instead of praying, what do? Netflix. Hey, Outer Banks. Hey, Blacklist. Right? Hey, NCIS. Some of you are like, how'd you know my show? Let's be honest. They're just like the big ones. Right? And instead of going to Scripture, this is my problem, I just started scrolling. Right? I just started scrolling. But look what Jesus did. 5:16 in Luke. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. And if you've ever studied his life, you see this. Every one of the Gospels, what did Jesus do? He left. Why? He went up a mountain. He went to a place. He went to a garden, a place where he could be alone, and it was quiet, and he prayed. And so he found these times to pray. And I know what you're thinking. Well, he doesn't have 3 kids. Jesus was the busiest guy on the planet, right? He literally saved the world. None of us have ever done that. Pinky and the Brain have tried. But that's it, right? They're the only other ones. But he found time to pray. Now, did he do it real early in the morning? Well, you know, Pastor, I don't get up early. He also did it real late at night, right? We remember the Patrick Swayze story when he walked across water. He was praying all night. So you got morning and night. He doesn't say it has to be a certain time. He just says do it, right? And so I want to look at one story with you and highlight this, okay? The first thing Jesus does to start his ministry is what? Takes a sabbatical. Right? He gets baptized. This is my son, who I am well pleased. The Spirit leads him to the wilderness, to a lonely place to be tempted by the devil, where he fasts and prays. And I've always read this like the devil comes after us when we are tired, wore out, hungry, hangry. And so I want you to look at this. I want to just take your perspective and switch it just a minute. What if we see the wilderness as a place of strength instead of a place of weakness? After 40 days of prayer and fasting, Jesus had the strength to take on the devil, right? He was prepared from that time alone. And we think about this because what happens so often after Jesus does ministry, what does he do? He withdraws and he prays, right? So he has this awesome day of healing people, spending time with people, casting out demons, healing the sick, teaching, and then what does he do? Very next day, he sleeps in, has some brunch, right? Makes some cinnamon rolls. No, he gets up early. And he prays, right? He pursues silence and solitude so that he could gather strength and focus to do what he needed to do, right? Jesus comes out of the wilderness with clarity about his identity and his calling, right? His time away with God helped him to say yes to the right things and no to the wrong things. And so we see this all the time, right? Jesus gets away. And I want you to explain solitude is not isolation. They are very different things, right? Solitude is engaging with God. Isolation is trying to escape the world, right? Solitude is how you open yourself to God, but isolation puts a target on your back for our enemy. And so I'm not telling you to be isolated. I'm not telling you to be alone. Jesus was alone on the cross so that you and I never had to be, right? I want you to find that time to get away. So use your shower time. right? Create intentional time to be silent with God. Use your morning drive. Use your lunch break. Go to that park that's across the way and sit on a bench. Create space in your week simply to get away. And the second one is this, right? The second one is a Sabbath, right? We've heard this Old Testament thing, take a day off. Like some of you are alive long enough to remember when the whole world shut down on Sundays except for the church, right? And we think about this practice and it's so outdated, but many of you know, right? The most successful Chick-fil-A, what do? They close on Sunday. I met a guy. He told me, he said, man, I owned Waffle Houses. I ran Waffle Houses, multiple Waffle Houses. You ever been to Waffle House? They're open all the time, every day. He said, I own one Chick-fil-A. Guess which one's way better? Chick-fil-A. He said, I owned tons. We work. You would think they made so much more money. He said, we're closed one whole day. Right? The one day we all want it. Of course. Couldn't have picked Monday? I'm just saying. But Sabbath, it literally means to stop and to delight. And so it's more than just a way of rest, right? It's the way of being in this world. It's the way that we abide with Jesus. It's literally a time set apart to stop and delight intentionally with God. But the problem is we're so busy, we don't know how to just sit with God, right? We're so distracted, we don't know how to just sit with God. And we all know this, right? But you go all the way back to the beginning, what did God do? 6 days, make. Seventh, he rested, but he delighted, right? Who walked the garden with Adam and Eve? God. He delighted in what he had made. And so he set up a rhythm, one for us to follow. So if we go shoulder to shoulder with Jesus, we see this idea. And I know what you're thinking, right? I told you this earlier. The devil never takes a day off. So he's coming after us. So what do? We should never take a day off. But I want to give you this. I don't know if you know this or not, but the devil loses. He loses. So if you want to work, guess what's going to happen to you? You're going to lose. They did a study, There's a group of people who religiously observe the Sabbath. Never miss it. Do you know what the research found about their life? They live 10 years longer than every single one of us who never take a day off. Crazy thing, you know what happens when you break down their life and add 1 day each week? You know how many years that accounts to? 10. How crazy is that? Now, I'm not telling you if you strictly observe the Sabbath, you're going to gain life. Don't quote me on that. But there you go, right? Scripture tells us to remember to keep the Sabbath holy. Exodus 20, verse 8. That's in the Big 10, right? Do not murder. Do not commit adultery. Number 10, it's the one spiritual discipline that's commanded in Exodus. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. Why does he use that word, remember? Because it's easy to forget, but he says it's holy, it's blessed, it's set apart by me. It's easy to get sucked into the speed of life and hurry. But then here's the cool thing. Next book later, same verse, the word changes in Deuteronomy 5. He says, observe the Sabbath by keeping it holy and set apart, right? As the Lord your God has commanded you. So what's the difference between observe and remember? You observe Christmas. You observe Easter. What do? You plan for it, right? You go to it with anticipation. And you're like, oh, I'm going to enjoy this day. Or for some of you, you dread this day. But either way, you're thinking about it ahead of time. And that's what he wants us to do with this Sabbath. And so Sunday doesn't work for us. So at our house, I married a teacher. Any teachers in here, you know what day our Sabbath starts? Friday night. We don't do nothing. Friday night, that's our time. Cell phones are off. We watch a family movie unless you're distracted by your cell phone like your husband and your wife calls you out and be like, I wish you'd just be present. And I'm like, dang, conviction. I can't even watch TV and rest with my family without getting distracted. And so the Sabbath is a time for us to stop and delight. And here's the last one as we wrap up, right? If you're like, man, those two practices, I could never do those. I could never get away and be silent. I got 2 kids under 2. You don't know my life, okay? I could never just take time. It doesn't have to be a full day. Ours is like 12, 13, 14 hours, right? But here's something you can do. Just slow down. Just slow down. And I got some practical tips as we wrap up this sermon, okay? They're going to pop up behind me. You're going to laugh when you read them. Drive the speed limit. Anybody drive the speed limit? Liar. Right? Drive the speed limit on the way home, but number 2 goes with it. Don't do it in the fast lane. You annoy the rest of us. Do it in the slow lane. I promise you. We think this is silly, and it is, but drive the speed limit for 1 whole day. Just commit to doing it 1 whole day. You won't, because it's terrible. It's awful. You ever driven 30 miles an hour? I feel like I could run that fast. I can't. And here's an easy one, right? Here's an easy one. No cell phone on your drives, right? They go away. Kicking it old school like my mom, put it in the glove box, right? Put it in the glove box. No cell phone on your drives. That means no texting for sure, but no phone at stoplights. Just sit there and look around. You'll see some funny people. Right, number 4, show up to any appointment, any meeting you have 10 minutes early. And again, no phone. Just sit there. You know, it's really uncomfortable when you go sit in the waiting room. What are you doing? I'm just here for my appointment. Oh, do you need something? Nope, I'm just here early. Tell them why. I'm here to learn some patience. Oh, don't you pray for patience? Then you have a cool conversation. Right, number 5, this is the next slide. Some of you are going to hate me for this. Put your phone on airplane mode. Oh, I could never. You know, what if my kids need me? They don't. How many of you live life without cell phone for years? We're fine. We're okay. I still made it. Did I get lost a few times? The street lights kicked on. I made my way back home. Well, they might need me at work. They don't need you. If they need you every day, all day, then your work's going to fail as soon as you die. Right? You're not that important, I promise. You know what happens if something happens to me this week? Somebody will be here next week. True for you too. If you're like, oh, they need me at work. No, they don't. They'd replace you in a heartbeat. But your family, they need you. God wants to spend time with you, right? Put your cell phone on airplane mode. Or you want to go crazy, give it up for an hour. You want to be real crazy, just give it to me. I'll keep it here all week. And no, you won't. Try it. I'm just saying, try it. We'll lock it up, turn it off. Turn it off for the day. And here's my favorite one. Put your phone to sleep. Put it to bed, right? You tuck your kids in, put it to bed, and then don't get it up until after the quiet. Well, you know, it's my alarm clock. I'll buy you one. Well, I just need music to play. I'll get you a box fan or a noisemaker. We just make excuses all the time, right? Put it to bed, because here's what you know. Your smartphone, right, can either be a terrific servant or a terrible master. You guys need to remember, myself included, I pay for mine, right? You pay for yours. It's not the boss. And you're like, well, I'm not controlled by it. Prove it. Turn it off. No, don't you be telling me what to do, Pastor. I got a job interview tomorrow. That's fine. Turn it off after they call you. Turn it off, right? Put it to bed. Set limits for social media and TV, right? Set limits. Smart. Don't give it to your kids. And then here's a crazy one. Take a day every month or every other month. Maybe it's just for an hour. We had the privilege of doing this with our Accelerate group, and I'm not playing. None of them are here, so I can say this. I had people literally lock themselves in a closet, right? Literally. And it scared me as I was like watching because their kids were coming around, and I was like, whoa. She's like, oh, I'm in here praying. I'm like, my bad. But just find that time. We got to sit down and pray for an hour, uninterrupted, just time of prayer. You're like, that could never work. It could if you schedule it, because you always have time for what you have time for. And here's what I need you to know, right? The goal is not perfection. It's just consistent progress, right? It's just practice. Just practice it. Just practice it. Here's the last thing I want to leave you with, because I know I've talked for a long time. I'd like to tell you I'm sorry, but I'm not. I'm just being honest. When you mess up, right? When you mess up or you start to get hurried, here's something I want you to pray. It's real simple. Take a picture of it if you want. Here's the prayer. God, help us walk slow enough to experience Jesus fully and love people deeply. That's it. You look at that picture, not on your cell phone because you're not allowed to do it when you're driving. And after you turn it off for an hour, but you would have that memorized before you leave this place. Help me to walk slow enough to experience Jesus fully and love people deeply, right? Because Jesus walked his whole life, but his life was very intentional. Every step he took was towards the cross. Day after day, step after step, expressing one thing, his love for God and his love for you and me. And so that's the way that we want to follow. Imagine if in our hurting and divided world, the church, this house, this community was loving, caring, and united enough to walk slow enough to engage people who are far from God, to show the love of a God who stepped out of heaven and came to earth as a perfect, sinless Jesus, who day after day walked towards the cross to give his life for you. Right, as the band comes back up, if you're following Jesus, right, if you're a follower of Jesus, guess where you're walking? You're walking towards a cross. You're walking to lay down your life for something far more important. And so what if we become a family, right? We become a community that walks slow enough to experience Jesus fully so that we can love people deeply. You have time for what you choose to have time for. If you're tired, worn out, overwhelmed, overworked, then Jesus invites you to come, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you